Rainbow in the dark, found a way through, carried every token like a message from you. No more broken tunnels, just a path that stays. Trustless, tireless, running night and day. Aurora engine, heart of a storm, turn no code loose in a newborn form. Plug in your vision, hit deploy. One click later, you're alive on day. Oh, all the means said to yours, so we drove a little more. Under every single joke was a battle plan. Raise your hands through the aurora. Watch it light the chain tonight. From near times it runs the border, bringing every dream inside. From the bridge into the future, where the thieves cut clean and true. This is more than just a network, it's a promise shining through. We stack our homes like blocks in the
Good afternoon, happy Friday, and welcome to this week's version of Alpha Leaks. My name's Declan, I'm the CEO of Aurora. This week we're going to be sharing some interesting things that we've been working on throughout the week. Now, starting with the less interesting components, we had our standard Aurora token burn update, which is in line with token economy. We burned 19,665 Aurora for the month of March. Now, one of the big pieces that we announced this week, which was also something I actually talked about last week on Alpha Leaks, was Calyx. So we publicly announced after Alpha Leaks that we have paused Calyx. I did kind of go over the reasons why last week, but given that we've done the public announcement, I expect there's going to be more questions this week. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to cover it again. You know, so Calyx is something we launched in the back end H2 of last year. It took a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of work, and as we said in our post, there's been a huge amount of learnings, that we've taken from the two Calyx projects that we initially launched. But we also have to be pragmatic as a company, right? So one of the issues that we saw pretty much from the end of December, certainly throughout the Q1 of this year, is the volatility in the market. So what does this actually mean? And I can see actually, Leoton, you've already asked a question, right? What metrics would indicate the right conditions to resume Calyx? So I'll cover this with both things. Now, what we found from speaking to projects and from our own analysis is two things. First of all, the sheer volatility in the market and the kind of depression on token prices across the board, especially within altcoins, meant that liquidity was more fragmented than ever. People were much more hesitant to invest and swap. Now, why would they be more hesitant to invest and swap? Well, let's use the NEAR token as an example, right? So if you compare the NEAR token price today to what it was, say, Q2 of last year, right? You're looking at a 66% reduction, right? So if you want to invest $100 and you're using your NEAR tokens to do that on a Calyx project launch, arguably you're doing it at a 66% lower rate, which means if the NEAR token suddenly goes back up, and we've obviously been seeing a lot of significant climbs with the NEAR token over the past few months, arguably there's a loss there. But secondly, it compounds that risk because you're using that token, which you're already down on, to buy another token, which you're uncertain on. And this applies across the board, right? I'm just using this as an example, but it applies across the board with everybody, even Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Zcash. So as a result, that meant that buying pressure is also going to be more difficult for projects that are trying to launch. On the flip side of it is the projects themselves. So what we've seen over the past quarter is even really successful projects that have launched elsewhere, so projects that have launched on CoinList, projects that have launched at Binance, they've seen huge crashes in token prices and market cap following those token launches themselves. So what that means is even if you're finding a really strong project that has the firepower, has the bandwidth, and has the kind of the necessary teams in place to be able to have a successful token launch, even then, even if they do everything right, the token's getting depressed. So what this kind of creates is the perfect storm, where it's difficult for us, as Calyx, to be able to state what the value and the input is going to be, but it's also difficult for projects to be able to determine what they want their soft cap to be, or to determine how much they want to raise. Then when you add in the fact that you've also got centralized exchanges and market makers and all of these different things in the background, it makes it very, very challenging. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more insight and answers a few more questions in relation to kind of some of the challenges that launchpads are having. Now, putting all of that to one side, there is another reason that we're pausing Calyx, and that's because we're focusing very heavily on our intents-based projects. Now, Near Intents has obviously seen huge success. We talk about it most weeks. They've processed over $15 billion in volume to date. We obviously launched the swap widget in January of this year. And of course, last week I announced Intents Connect, which is going to be the newest project. What we've seen is huge interest from projects all across the spectrum, not just within this ecosystem, but all over the show. It is the responsible and right thing to do to really focus our efforts and attention in areas where we know we can get immediate traction and deliver immediate value, both for builders, for community, and of course, for our own projects as well. And that's why we've been focusing so much on this. Calyx isn't being shut down. It's simply being paused. Now, when will we unpause it? That's a question I can't answer. There's a number of factors, both including the market conditions itself, many of the things I've just spoke about, and of course, the progress and the success that we're seeing with our intents-based projects as well. So I will, of course, share more updates and more news on Calyx and what we'll be doing over the coming months, as and when it's right to do so. Now, moving on from that, I was pleased to announce that our apparently very handsome head of product, Armand, was actually on the grounds at EthCC this week. If you had a chance to meet him, fantastic. I look forward to hearing what you discussed and how we could potentially be working with you when Armand comes back in next week. If you didn't, please do reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to see how Aurora can work with you and how our Intents project products can actually help enhance the products that you're offering today. Now, moving on, Near Intents, of course, has been talking about confidential swaps for some time, since San Francisco. They're now live on near.com, powered by Near Intents. If you haven't already had a look for yourself, I strongly suggest going to near.com. It hides your amounts, it hides your routes, your wallets are hidden, there's no public traces, there's no copy trades, there's no wallet tracking. It really does provide you a truly confidential experience. Now, I know one of the questions that's going to be coming from the community is, when will confidential swaps be coming to our products? All I can say is watch this space, and we'll be giving some more news and more updates on that as it comes. Now, in other news this week, we were pleased to announce that Monad is now live on the Near Intents widget as well. So if you're a user of Monad or you have assets on Monad, you can now access them directly from the Near Intents widget. And of course, you'll be able to access it from Intents Connect when it goes live. But that wasn't the only thing that we've been working on this week. We've actually dropped some new feature updates for Near Intents Widget Studio. You can now view your full transaction history and stay on top of your balances in real time as you're working. But I've invited Chris. Chris is our technical program manager. He's the person who's overseeing the implementation of the features that Armand puts his way. So Chris, welcome to Alpha Leaks this week. Chris is going to walk us through a little bit more information around what these updates mean and what we've been working on. So Chris, over to you.
Hey, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I wanted to share Intents Studio with you, showing those features. So here we have Widget Studio, and I picked USDC on base, and I want to swap to Monad. So basically, I can enter some amount and then click swap. And in my wallet, I confirm the transaction. And here we go. I swap USDC to Monad. So we do have this mentioned on the support now. And then we have the transaction history. So as Declan mentioned, the balances previously they didn't update automatically. So now we just need to wait because in the back, what happens in the background is we check the balances, and once they are updated, we'll see that on the interface. There you go. And then the last thing is we have the transaction history. So after the swap, we can see what we actually swapped in the past. So those are the updates for this week.
And Chris, transaction history, I mean, it's something I know I've asked about, before. Why don't more places have them? Why don't more products have them? You'd think this feature would be quite an easy thing, right, for every wallet and every project to have, but actually it's not quite that simple, is it? Perhaps you can explain to people why, something like this actually does take a bit of work to implement.
Yeah, it does. Like as you saw, like when I was doing the swap, I had to wait for my balance to update, right? So there are some complexities here and there to actually make this feature whole. And then it's like on here, it's just a list, right? I can see that those swaps happen, but it's actually not that easy. Like we have different types of swap, different assets, different chains. So it's actually not that easy. But with this update, we can actually just enable it in the swap widget. You can just enable it and see the transaction history of the wallet that you see. So it's pretty easy now.
No, brilliant. Thank you. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Obviously, last week I talked about Intents Connect, and that it's the big new thing that you and your team are working on flat out, to release to everybody. Is there anything you would like to share, or any insights you'd like to share, or learnings, something that we can kind of tease to people?
Well, the engines are burning. Like we work a lot on this new feature on Intents Connect. And there are interesting things here because you basically can use different wallets from different chains to do operation on different chains. I can use my Solana wallet to, for example, deposit to Morpho or do different actions. So this is pretty exciting because previously, like a few years ago, it wasn't possible at all. And now we are building this. So it will be great from the user point of view.
No, fantastic. It's quite interesting because one of the questions that I sometimes get, and I think it was even on one of our previous Alpha Leagues, is how will Intents Connect be different from one-click swap, right? Because on face value, they appear quite similar, right, in terms of features, but in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. Perhaps you could give a bit more of a breakdown, right, as to just why Intents Connect is almost the evolution, right, of one-click swap.
Yeah, the way we explain this internally is that there are it's like two-legged operation. One leg is actually to use one click, and this is where you actually do the swap. But usually when you do the swap, you want to do something with those funds. So for example, I swap USDC to Ethereum on Base, I don't know, for example, but then I want to do something with this Ethereum on Base. So this is the second leg of the operation. And with the Intents Connect product, you can integrate it in a unified interface. So it's way easier. Instead of like joining together different tools and the different APIs, you just have it all in a single place. So for the user, it's a really good experience. And as well for the integrator, they have a lot of flexibility in integrating with different protocols.
No, fantastic. So we're obviously going to be drip feeding more and more information regarding Intents Connect over the next few weeks as we get closer to the launch date of the product. Chris will probably come back and join us in some future Alpha League sessions to walk us through. We've been actually releasing pretty steadily and pretty rapidly over the past few weeks. Every single week so far, I've had a new network to announce or a new feature to announce, which is fantastic, right? It aligns with Aurora's kind of vision and push towards that rapid growth and that rapid scalability. So Chris, thank you very much for joining us on Alpha Leaks today. Just looking at the questions, but I actually think we've covered it already, right? The main question today was regarding signals in relation to Calyx, which I think I've already covered off. So again, obviously, when we start seeing some stability across the market, and when we start seeing kind of some greater interest and confidence from projects looking to launch tokens, that's when we'll be revisiting opening Calyx, for public launches. I can see we've got a couple of other questions coming through here. Okay, so we have a question from Immortal. What do you have to say about the 50% on Coca Sorry, you'll have to expand on that for me, Immortal. 50% what? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to there. If you could just send another, post another comment for us, and I'll answer that best I can. We have another question here. So what partnerships should we be looking forward to hearing about on Near Intents? So obviously there's kind of two streams here, right? There's partnerships that are being handled by kind of Diffuse and the team there. And then there's obviously partnerships on our side. What I can tell you is we're obviously very focused right now on delivering Intents Connect, which is our own kind of native product rather than a partnership. However, there are several partnership conversations that are happening at this very moment in time that are going to bring some pretty interesting features and functionalities to, specifically to users, actually, that will be looking to leverage Intents Connect in the future. More to come on that, once we've actually finalized them. We have a question from Praise. What do you have for us on Q2? Well, the big thing here is all about Intents Connect. So as you just heard from Chris there, we're working full steam ahead to bring this in April. We believe this is going to be our most popular products and most certainly our flagship product moving forwards. As Chris kind of mentioned when I asked him earlier, how this is different from one-click swap is it really does tie the end-to-end process together, right? So at the moment, any project can take one-click swap. It works flawlessly, and it allows users to swap pretty much any asset on any chain. However, the user then still needs to interact directly with the smart contract or the dApp in question to be able to complete their intention. So for example, if I'm swapping my ETH into 100 USDC so that I can stake it with one click swap, I'd still need to manually stake it. With Intents Connect, not only does it handle that swap, but it will actually automatically stake that for you as well, which also means that there's going to be much less friction, for users that are looking to interact with dApps. And for dApps themselves, it's actually a really powerful tool, right? Because at the moment, most dApps and applications, they're kind of reliant on wallet connectors, right? And wallets themselves to be able to provide a lot of this multi-chain bridging and swapping functionality. But with Intents Connect, it really does put that power of distribution back, into their own hands. So yeah, that is going to be our key focus, for Q2. It's going to be implementing Intents Connect, onboarding a lot of the projects that we're already speaking to, and then pushing forwards. Okay, so Immortal, I can see you've put a question there. Yeah, so you can top up your account you can top up your Coca account from Aurora Chain and get a 50% discount on the services that Coca offers. Yeah, I mean, look, it's no secret that we're working very closely with Coca, right? They're a great partner of ours. They're very interested, not only obviously in the kind of swap widget, but also in Intents Connect as well. The recent announcement around the discount on services is just another way to kind of strengthen that partnership. Why does it benefit both of us? Well, it benefits us because what we're gunning towards and what we're pushing towards is really getting volume through our products, and Coca is a fantastic partner to help us do that. And for them, it adds another distribution route and another onboarding route for assets. So everybody knows I'm a user of Coca. I've been a big advocate, of both the team there and the product itself. So for me, this is obviously a fantastic proposition, and I highly recommend everybody take a look. So just checking if there's any more questions. Yeah, so Alpha, is Calix going to be back anytime soon? Yeah, as I said earlier, it really does depend on the market conditions and the progress that we're making with our Intents-based products. What I can say is we certainly won't be looking at it again in Q2. Beyond that, let's see. So I think I've covered all of the questions there. If not, I apologize. But have a great weekend. Rest up. I hope you enjoyed the updates this week, and I look forward to sharing more alpha with you on next Friday's session. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.